I'm not real used to being on this side of the camera, so y'all have to excuse me. Before this started, Brother Bob was telling me about Roger Walton and sharing a little bit about him. Told me he ran the crematory here in Memphis for one of them, and I shared with Brother Bob that my wife and I were discussing our final arrangements here a couple weeks ago, and I told her that I thought I wanted to be cremated, so I think she has me an appointment with him for next Tuesday. I'm going to try to be serious now. When I was asked to give my testimony is so all over the place that God has shared so many blessings with me in my life that I have a testimony about everything that can possibly happen to a person. And so it's hard for me to do that. So if I'm going to give the whole thing, we're going to need to order in some more chicken. The other thing, I'll get started with, I want to read, my favorite Bible verse is John 14:3. But I'm going to back up and I'm going to read verses 1 and 2 to precede 14:3. It says, "Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also." That verse is so full of hope and promise. And God, like I said, I count it as blessings, but I have been through a lot of hardships, a lot of tragedies and difficulties in my life, and I count those as blessings. And I'm not looking for sympathy from anybody about the things that happened to me and what I've gone through, because they were all opportunities to share Jesus with somebody that I was going to meet. And I was fortunate enough to be raised in a Christian family, and we got up every Sunday morning, and we went back on Sunday night, we went back on Wednesday night. If they had something on Thursday night or any other night during the week, we were there for that too. And God used my parents to influence me. And when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I don't remember exactly how, I decided I wanted to be baptized. And in my thoughts, as well as an 8, 9-year-old boy could do, I accepted Jesus as my Savior, but I did not surrender. At that point, I guess I was getting fire insurance like so many people talk about, but I also grew up, my dad tell a little bit of my background. This has a good Italian later on. He had a retread shop in Memphis, and big deal, and I'd go to work with him. I was a little bitty fellow, 5, 6 years old, and he'd take me to work. And, all these men in the retread shop, they keep me busy all day long. They roll that stack of tires over here. So I roll that stack of tires. A little while later, they said, roll that stack of tires over there. And I'd roll over there. And I figured out what I've been learning how to roll tires. And, I was around older men, even from that time. I'd spend my summers, a couple of days a week down there with my dad, and I was just around guys that were, working men in their 30s and 40s. And my dad, when I was about 11 years old, moved his retread plant to Olive Branch, Mississippi. And he purchased a building that was there, and he wanted that metal building. It just so happened to have a service station out on the front of it. Of course, me being a kid, and I was all excited, let's open up that service station, Dad. So he did, and let me run it when I was there, and I was selling used tires and pumping gas. And when I get into trouble, if there's something I didn't know how to do, I go back and get one of those guys out of the retread shop, and they come up there to fix my problem, get me going again, and there I'd be off. So there I was spending my summers and my Saturdays and after school playing the service station. I say playing because I was making my dad money, but I was really playing. I was having fun. And anyway, by the time I was about 16 years old, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And our family was told that she had about 3 to 6 months to live. And of course, you grow up with that. It is a hard thing to think that your mother's fixing to die. And of course, she prayed and asked the Lord. I had a younger sister that was only 10. I was 16, she was 10. And she prayed and asked the Lord to let her live to see my younger sister grow up. Well, God granted her those 10 years. And my little sister got married in September. And basically was grown at that time. And she was 20. And 3 months later, my mother was dead. So God put that on hold, and I got to witness that. The next thing that happened along at that same time, because I've been running this service station, and I had built me a pretty good little clientele coming by and getting used tires. I was offered a job at the tire store over at South Haven. So I took it and went to work over there, and they were kind of shocked because here comes this kid that already knows how to do everything, and he also came with customers. And it was like, wow. You know, so they offered me a full-time job, and I took it, and that was the summer I was 16. When I turned 17, because of this full-time job, at that time they offered what was Memphis Evening Adult Classes, which were people that had dropped out of high school and decided they needed a high school diploma and were going back. Well, there I was going to school at night, working in the day. I was spending all my time with adults, people that, like I said, they were 40, 45 years old. Those were people that influenced me. And I'm thankful that God put that in my life the way that He did. Because about the time that all my school buddies started experimenting with drugs and all these other things, I missed all that because I was busy working these old guys. Oh, you don't want to do that, you know. Stay away from that. That's no good. It's not going to help you. Somehow this dumb boy listened to him and stayed away from him. But a few years later, like I said, then go back to when my mother passed away. That hit me really hard, and it was I was very close to my mother, and her death really affected me. And at this time, at the 17 also, when I went full time, that was when I decided that I really didn't need to go to church all that much. You know, I was able to make my own decisions in life. And I had gone out on my own and doing things, and even though I wasn't involved in drugs and those type of things, I might occasionally take a drink, but I could count on one hand probably the number of times that I drank alcohol between teenager and the time my mother died. And when she died, it just struck me, and I would spend the weekend and spent a lot of time consuming alcohol. Thought it was my job to drink up all the beer and whiskey. I found out they could make it a lot faster than I could drink it, but I still tried and drank enough whiskey and stuff before the battleship. But I also, from the time I was 17, started a downward spiral because like I said, I left God out of my life. Now, I still would pray to God, and I prayed the prayers of stupid young men. It was like, God, if you'll give me $1 million, I'll give you $500,000 back. Now, in other words, God already had $1 million, so He didn't need me to give Him $500,000 back. He already had it. But that was my prayer, and of course, fortunately, He didn't give me the $1 million. Because if He had, I probably would have reneged on my $500,000 back, and I probably would have found some excuse why I couldn't do that. I'll do that on the next $1 million, Lord. But that's the way young men think. That's what they do. But I was in this downward spiral. My mother died. And like I said, I went through all this. Thought we'd entered heaven. I've gone through all these difficulties. I completely messed up my life. I had, like I said, through the drinking, I quit tithing. I didn't give anything to God. I just spent my money on things that I wanted to do. And I wound up hitting the bottom. And I can remember there are several things about hitting the bottom that sticks with me to this day. And one was the fact that I'd been playing music in all these beer joints, clubs around town, and I was not really, but a little bit of a celebrity, only if you went into the worst beer joints around where I was well known. And I can remember one night in my life just being whole turmoil. I was having marital problems. I was having financial problems. I was just about that far from losing everything I owned. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I went into this beer joint where I was a frequent entertainer, and I went in there to get my ego stroked. Because I would go in there, and they'd pat me on the back and tell me how great it was and buy me a beer. And I was just doing that. Well, this particular night, have to remember I'm married, so this is part of the problem that I had. So I'm sitting in this beer joint, and I know none of y'all ever been in a beer joint, but I have. And all of them behind the bar have got a mirror. And anyway, I'm looking in this mirror, and at the end of the bar, there's a guy sitting there that I've been friends with, I guess you call him, and he was waiting to go on trial for murder. He had beat a man to death with his fist. And I'm looking at him in that mirror, and I'm thinking, well, I'm glad I know that guy, because if he didn't know me, he might beat me to death with his fist. And then I'm looking down, up and down the bar, and there's a couple other guys sitting there, and they were brothers. And they were some of the nastiest looking.
Killers?
Yeah, they weren't killers, but they were pimps. And they were didn't have much of a, they had no testimony. They probably never heard of God. But anyway, I'm looking at them, and I'm thinking, well, I don't know why I want to call them guys my friends, because they're not really anything special about them. They're really kind of dirty and scroungy looking. And then this part where, remember, I was married, and I looked at this waitress that I was always flirting with, and I was asking her out on dates. Now, what I meant by a date was, let's go get a hotel room, and that was wrong, but that was a date, what I was looking for from her. And I looked at her and I thought, she's not really very pretty. Why would I want to go spend time with her? And then, as I'm looking at all these people, I look and I see myself, and I say, you look just like that people. And that was kind of the beginning of me recognizing that I had a problem. And of course, I go home, and like I said, things were spiraling downward. And all these things are going through my mind that I've witnessed looking at these people in the mirror. And when the bottom fell out, I hit the bottom, I said, ooh, well, I guess things got to get better from here because they can't get any worse. Well, wrong, because when I thought that, God showed me there was another bottom, and it fell out, and I hit the bottom again. And I thought, ooh, it's got to get better because it can't get any worse than this. And I did that several times, and as things just kept getting more and more out of control and more out of my ability to handle them, finally one day I was in the bottom of that, hit the new low, and I thought, well, I guess I should be thankful because it can always be worse. That was the point that God started with me. He pulled me out of that mess that I was surrounding me, and He climbed with me. He didn't just instantly pull me up out of it. It took a while. And gradually I began to work on my finances. I began to work on my marriage, which unfortunately didn't. I had played in that lifestyle too long, and it cost me my wife. But some years later, she had an affair, and she had left me, and I did not realize that she had left me for another man. I was struggling. I was trying to get her to come back home. I was just beside myself. I couldn't function. I couldn't think. I couldn't work. Of course, at this time, I've already given my life. This is what I have. When God pulled me up out of that, that's when I surrendered. And that's when I said, okay, God, let's do it your way. My way certainly can work. But anyway, she, as bad as she made herself look to all our church family and our friends and our relatives, and they all saw what she did, and the affair and all that came out in the open. And good old Lee looked pretty good through all that. But not really, because I knew in my heart that a lot of the things that I had done, a lot of the ways that I had treated her, had led her to where she was. And I was wrong in that, but God allowed me to overcome that. But during that period, during that time, I was working for a goods store, and I would go in and I would just do the bare minimum of what I had to do to get through my job for a day. My focus was on my wife, on my family, and trying to get all that fixed, and I was trying to get out of debt, and just all the things that go on with trying to build your life back together. And God was, like I said, He was right there holding my hand and walking me through it. Well, on September the 15th, 1989, my wife had been gone for a considerable amount of time. I don't know. She had left our children with me, and I didn't know how to boil a weenie, make a hot dog, much less cook anything. I didn't know anything at all. You know, I washed my red shirt with my white underwear and wore pink underwear for a while. So my boys wore pink underwear, which wasn't good for them at school, but did happen. But anyway, I went to work, and like I said, I just could not function like a man should. And I locked myself in the office, and I was in there, and I would just have my knees on the floor and my face planted in that office chair. And I was beside myself, and I asked God for three things, basically. And I told God, I said, God, I need my wife to come home and be the wife and the mother that she's supposed to be. Or just remove her from this situation where my focus and attention is not on that, where I can actually be the man you want me to be. The next thing I asked God for, I said, God, I want to know my children. I want them to know me, and I want to have a relationship with them that is better than just a normal father-son. I want there to be a bond between us. And the next thing was, I asked God, I said, God, I am working so many hours. I'm working 60, 70 hours a week, and this job is killing me, and I have all these responsibilities, and I really can't do the things I feel like you want me to do and work this many hours. So that was my prayer. And I didn't know where it was going, didn't know what it was, but I will tell you to be careful what you pray for. Because on September the 16th of 1989, that night, about 2 in the morning, of course I wake up, it hits me, go see your father-in-law. He and I had a really good relationship. We got along good. And he knew me, I knew him. There was no secrets really between us. And he knew what a pathetic husband I'd been. But he also knew that I loved his daughter. So anyway, the thought hit me, go see him. If there is anybody that can get your wife to come back home, it is him. So I woke up Sunday morning, September 17th of 1989, and I was so excited because I thought I had discovered the answer to getting my wife to come home, and this is all going to work out because I feel like God was in it. Well, we went to church that morning, and I planned on leaving after worship service and going to see my father-in-law, but I couldn't stand it. After Sunday school, I gathered the boys up and said, come on, we're going. And we left. Of course, they had no idea what we were going for. I just told them we were going to see their granddaddy and grandmother. So it was about a 45-minute drive. So we laughed and played some of the best memories of time with them was that trip. Well, as I was sitting there, I realized that we needed privacy to be able to discuss what we were discussing. So I allowed them to go with my brother-in-law, which was 17 at the time, about a mile down the road to see their great-grandmother, give us a chance to talk. They didn't make it a quarter mile from the house, and they got in a real bad collision. And, of course, there was a kid came running across the yard and up in the front door where I was. Of course, he knew who they were. And he said, Henry's had a wreck. That was my brother-in-law. So we jump in his pickup and go down to the scene, and I pick up one of my sons, and I think he's dead. And I'm holding him. Don't know what to do. You don't lay your dead child out. So we're in the back of this pickup. Everybody that was involved in the accident, the other car, the car my son was in, we were all in the back of this truck, had a topper on it, and we're going down the road headed for the Senatobia Hospital. And we started around a curve in the road, and my youngest son was laying on the floor. And he'd been whimpering and crying, but he had no response when you tried to talk to him. And suddenly he just flinched real big and went totally limp. And I thought that he died. I reached over to shake his foot, and when I did, we started around a curve in the road, and the one I was holding was to roll out of my lap, and I laid my hand on his chest, and I felt his heartbeat. There I was thinking that another one died, but this one's still alive. My oldest son was sitting there and had a big knot on his head about the size of a softball. He never lost consciousness, but he was 12 years old, and he was impacted emotionally by what all he saw and what all happened that day. And when we got to the hospital, for some reason I couldn't think of doing anything but calling my pastor. And that was Buddy Woods. It was his First Baptist one. And he instantly left and came down to the little Baptist hospital in Saratoga and prayed with me, stayed with me, and they sent the helicopters. They were fairly new service then, they didn't have two. And they sent them down for the two youngest ones, then sent one back for my oldest son. And of course I couldn't fly the helicopter, you had to be a patient or part of the staff. But my pastor gave me a ride from there to Lamar Hospital. And when we went in, the neurosurgeon came out, and the first thing he said to me was, "I don't believe your two youngest boys are going to make it." He said, "You need to be prepared to make some arrangements." So anyway, when that happened, I found a little chapel, which was in the old part of the bottom. It was down at the bottom elevator on the first floor, and I went in there, and I don't know how long I was in there, but I stayed in there and I talked to God. And God gave me a peace in my heart while I was in that chapel praying. He says, "Don't worry, everything will be all right." So that peace just overwhelmed me. And I went out, and people from my church at this time had begun to come in and there. And they were amazed at the peace that I had. And I just told them, I said, "God has told me this is going to be okay." And all three of them survived. All three of them lived normal life somewhat, but they had problems due to their emotional stress, their things. Any kids that go through divorce with their parents, it's tough on them. And I don't care what age they are, it's hard on them. The younger they are, the tougher it is. But in through all that, my wife never came back. She never really checked up. Matter of fact, she signed over full custody of the children to me. And she very rarely even got them for visitation, come pick them up for a weekend or anything. But some of that was, after a while, I realized some things were going on, and they were with her, and we put a stop to it. But I don't want to stop there. Of course, God didn't bless me, and I count all that as a blessing. And I thank God for the things I learned through that tragedy. I hate that my children suffered and what they went through and the lifetime effects that that's had on them. But I thank God for what He taught me through that period of my life, how He worked in my life, and how what other people witnessed me going through and the way I was able to have the courage and the peace to stand up. That spoke to many people of what it's like to have a relationship with God. The other thing in that was after we came home from the hospital, one right after the other, appliances started quitting. Hot water heater, refrigerator, stove, dishwasher, central heat and air unit, just on and on and on. Every appliance I had to quit. And finally, of course, I was struggling to try to pay for these things, get them replaced. And finally, the dryer went out. And I'm like, okay. So I'm washing clothes, and I'm taking them up to the laundromat and drying them. And just struggling with doing all. Like I said, I didn't know anything about doing laundry. I didn't know you're supposed to iron stuff. I just didn't know how to use one either. But anyway, through all of that, I had become reacquainted with a young lady that I had met when I was about 14 years old. And anyway, turned out she had a brand new washer and dryer. So we got married. And I might say it's been happily ever after. She had a 15-year-old daughter, And I was totally not prepared for a 15-year-old girl. I had no idea what to do with a girl. I had these boys, and she was totally not prepared for 3 boys. You know, like they had to, you know, I had one son one day, he came in with a snake, and, hey, look what I caught. You know, like, and she was like freaking out. I'm like, yes, son, that's nice. Take it back out and turn it loose in the yard. She didn't understand all that. It just didn't really set good with her that somebody bring a snake into her house. But anyway, there was a lot of difficulties in getting the 2 families blended together. And like I said, knew nothing about a 15-year-old girl, that was for sure. And it took some difficulty in her getting actually grown, and we had to forgive each other for some things. And but she and I finally developed when we have a decent relationship. But going through all that, life went on, and several other things happened. I'm going to try to skip over and give you the short version. I don't want to have to order any more chicken like I said. And I wound up and I was in the tire business. That's what I'd done my whole life growing up. And I had a little tire store down on State Line Road. I had all these customers. Remember the customers when I was 11 years old? They had followed me everywhere I went all these years. If I would change jobs, went to a different store, they followed me wherever I was. And so I had a pretty good customer base. But I didn't have any place to operate. I didn't have a store. I didn't have a building. And I ran across a man, and we'd known each other for a number of years, and he had a building and all the equipment, but he didn't have any business. So we formed a partnership, and that lasted for about 3 years. And anyway, the business burned. Now they say it was arson. I don't believe it was arson. The reason they said it was arson was because they had all these accelerants. Well, it does. It's an automotive shop. There's accelerants all throughout the whole place. And they talked about the fire starting in more than one place. Well, with tires, we had some upstairs, and when tires catch fire and they're stacked up, they fall over, and those tires will roll. So I really don't think it was arson, but I spent 4.5 years being investigated by the ATF, police department, fire department, and the insurance company. And that was an experience that I wouldn't wish on anybody, but I do understand completely and totally about how these people will confess to a crime they did not commit. Because if I had not been a faithful follower of Jesus, and if I had not had a strong mind, they made you want to confess. They put it on you like that, and you would confess to almost anything to just make it end. And they played every trick they could. And then when it was all over, one of them asked me, he says, you know, we never found any discrepancies in anything you ever told us. How can you explain that? I said, because I told you the truth, even if it made me look bad. And they said, well, I guess that would do it. I said, well, it will. So that all kind of washed it one way. Let me go back and tell you a little bit about my tithing testimony. Remember the accident? The one I almost broke down crying, still talking about it 30-something years later? Well, the day that accident happened, that Friday the 15th, when I prayed that prayer to God, God had blessed me, and that was the day that I paid off the last of my debt, with the exception of my home. And I was out of debt with IRS, I was out of debt with every finance company and every person I owed money. I had paid it all off, and except for my house. And I had $7 was all I had between me and nothing. And that accident happened. Of course, I had to take a leave of absence from work to be able to take care of my children. So their mother didn't come back, so somebody left me. So we spent around 5 months at Laverne Hospital, and when I left there that day, every bill, every house note that came due, every thing that I needed, the insurance didn't provide for, God blessed me with that money before I needed it, and there was always enough there to take care of my personal needs, which was to eat and do whatever I needed for myself until the next time that happened. And there was a dear friend that I went to church with. His name was Bob Stinson. Bob was a kind man, and he and I were close at church. We worked in the youth department together. And Bob was the first one that approached me. And if Bob had not approached me just like he did, in a way, in the manner he did, it could have been a whole different situation with my finances. But Bob came to me and he says, Lee, we've collected a little money for you. He had an envelope. And he said, don't let your pride stand in the way. He said, people are going to want to help you, and you need to allow them to do that. You'll deny them a blessing if you don't accept what they try to give you. And if he hadn't told me that, I had a lot of pride, and I wouldn't have taken money from people. And then before you know it, I'd have been in trouble trying to figure it out. But everything, like I said, that came along that I needed something financially, God provided for that. Ended up for me until it was the next time when there was going to be a need. Yeah. But the day we left the hospital for the last time, we were going home. I'm still unable to work because I've been spending all this time taking care of them. The day we left the hospital, I think I had somewhere close to that same $7 in my pocket. So God had provided everything through all of that, and I still had my $7. So there's a lot of things. After the store burned, same thing happened there. I had a certain amount of money in the bank, a little bit, but my whole income just quit, stopped, nothing. And when I acquired another job about 7 weeks later, I had about the same amount of money in the bank on my way to work as I did the day that the store burned. So God kind of provides in those kind of ways. But I got into the video business from the automotive business. It was after that store burned and I went to work for another shop in Whitehaven. And that kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things. One of them was how dumb I was about the automotive business. And those guys really fixed cars. They didn't just patch them up, keep going. They actually fixed them. I worked for an incredibly honest man that I didn't understand. It's the first time I'd ever worked at a shop where people would come in and drop off the keys and say, just tell Phil to fix whatever he sees wrong with it. And I said, okay, we'll call you with an estimate. No, just tell him to fix it. I don't care. And I've never heard of such a thing. That people would just come and say, if you see something, fix it. And I figured that out because of his honesty and the way that he dealt with people. If he made a mistake in diagnosing a car, he didn't try to make an excuse or do something. He just ate that mistake and then fixed what was wrong with it. And that's all he charged you for. And that spoke volumes to me on the honesty and the integrity of how business really ought to run. But it came today. I've been doing video part-time. I got started in video weddings and doing things, and it had grown to the point to where I either had to give it up or I had to quit my job. I had to do one of the two. So I prayed about it, and God opened the door, and I went and leased commercial property, moved it out of my house, and went up and was getting everything set up. And finally the day arrived that I'm supposed to, I've got to turn in my resignation or abandon ship on all this plans I made and done. And anyway, I went into work, and my boss usually gave me my check about lunchtime so I could go deposit while I was on lunch. So he comes into the office, and we both start trying to speak at the same time. Well, on the way to work that day, I prayed. I said, Lord, give me an affirmation that I'm doing the right thing. I hope have not put myself ahead of where you want me to be. I feel like I've done what's wrong. But give me an affirmation that what I'm doing is right. So when he starts giving me that check, I'm getting ready to resign. And I said, no, you go ahead. And he fired me. That's pretty good affirmation that I've made the right decision. And it was a struggle getting things going. And when you're used to making this amount and all of a sudden you're trying to figure out where your next quarter is coming from, it can be difficult. But God blessed me through all of that. And I want to kind of close with a couple of things. One of the things is the pain and the suffering that I've done throughout my life. And I didn't share everything with you. There's been just I've had my feet knocked out from about every 7 or 8 years my whole life. So it's about time we get knocked over. But every time I think about those hardships and those tragedies, I think that doesn't compare anything to what Christ did on the cross. What he did there for all of us And I know I'm probably the only sinner in the room, but there's some other sinners outside of here that he died for them. And when you take all of my sins and all the sins of everybody else and you pile them on one man, I just can't comprehend how that would be. And the last thing I want to share, and I'll give it back to Bob, is my favorite verse. With all these tragedies and with all these hardships and all the suffering and pain, God always prepared a place.
Amen. Amen.